and I hope whatever we're able to put out, you guys find of some use, or, you know, get some ideas, just kick stuff around. Because the issues are certainly similar amongst all of us. And RAP is a collection of organizations that wanted to centralize our research and our training materials, and to really focus solely on connecting where our communities overlap, and where our issues overlap. And that whole thing in the presentation about the groups fighting with each other, I think we do have a solution that has worked for us. I'm not saying a solution for the universe, but we've been through a lot of the same struggles. We've been through a lot of the same issues. We've seen the 5-year plans, 10-year plans, 3-year plans, 1-year plans, housing first plans, chronic homeless plans, whatever plan they want to come up with. And we know how full of shit they are. And we know that we need to be thinking outside of how to more humanely sweep the presence of people that are unhoused in our communities. And now more than ever, we got a whole bunch more people coming into our community that are not going to be housed, coming from our community and coming into our streets. They're not new. They didn't arrive from somewhere else to do this shit. We're going to see an increase in homelessness like we saw in the early 1980s when Reagan eliminated HUD funding for affordable housing. So we all got to recognize that's coming, that we're not going to magically refund HUD at this point. We're not going to magically refund full employment at a living wage at this point. That shit isn't on the horizon. What's on the horizon is at some point the eviction moratoriums are going to drop off, just like the TARP bailout money, the little piece of it we got dropped out after a couple of years. And the unemployment numbers, and for all of the undocumented workers that aren't even in those numbers, is gonna be off the fucking hook. And we need to be prepared not to maintain the status quo, but to be pushing for housing as a human right, for healthcare as a human right, and for a living wage or living income for everybody. And this is the time we need to be gearing that messaging up. So we make stickers and posters and shit, you know. But I mean, we use two things to help guide us. All of the core member groups of RAP do documented street outreach and send it into the main office. We collate it, we give them back their local numbers, we connect it to the national numbers to get a guarantee that whatever issues RAP is working on as a collection of organizations aren't driven by, does Denver do it the best, or Denver's opinion is the right opinion, or Philly's opinion, or Austin's opinion, or Portland's, or Oregon, or Oakland. It's what does the street outreach tell us? Like, we're not going to rep all people that are unhoused in our community, but we're going to rep the people that we talk to. And we document what they say the priorities are. We document what they say is happening. And then our research, our messaging, our artwork, our organizing, our demos, our street theater, everything we do collectively isn't what any one of us individually think we should be doing. It's based on 1,700 street outreaches that told us sleeping, sitting, and standing still were the top 3 criminal offenses unhoused community members are being charged with. So we wrote the Right to Rest Act. We didn't do the Homeless Bill of Rights legislation. We did the Right to Rest Act to decriminalize those activities. Like it, and whether people agreed or disagreed with us, we at least were always able to say, well, we did 1,700 street outreaches and 81% of the people told us they were being criminalized for sleeping, 78% for standing still, 76% for sitting on a sidewalk. So we wrote legislation to decriminalize sleeping, sitting, and standing still. You know, it's just, you cut through the personality and you get to the core, documented core of a community of people saying this is what is happening to us in our lives. And they're not all going to agree. But you start getting into the 80 percentile, you're talking about a bunch of freaking people with some accountability behind it. You're not saying what you think, you're saying what people told you. And if anyone wants to come look at the 1,700 street outreaches I'm talking about, I have each one of those fucking documents in a box somewhere. I don't know where the hell it is, but it's somewhere. And I have it on an Excel sheet. And if anyone says, why did you do the Right to Rest Act? I don't have to say, well, LA Ken said that's what we should do, or Huff said we should do it, so we did it. Nobody gives a shit about that. What people care about is 1,700 people told us this is why they're being criminalized, and these are the charges they're facing when they get ticketed or arrested or harassed. And so we're trying to stop that. And homeless people weren't the first. Ask anybody about Jim Crow or about sundown towns or about anti-Okie laws or about ugly laws or about the Basurero Treaty, like Japanese American Exclusion Act. How we're seeing unhoused community members treated today is no differently than how we've seen other community members treated in the past. It's as old as colonization.
Thanks, Paul. I'm really hearing, I just summarize one important point you made so that I really want to have us take it in, is I'm really hearing how important it is to focus on practical solutions rather than, you know, some idea, that's attached to a person or an ideology or something like that. And that's, I'm hearing you talk about the importance of that for your work being effective.
Well, but it's also, I think, a matter of how to get different organizations. I mean, to me, the more different places unhoused community members have to plug in, because we all got different personalities and stuff, right? So you don't want only one place in a community, which is where everyone that's Black goes here and everyone that's homeless goes here. You don't want that. But you want to have your organizing guided under the leadership of the experiences of the people you're talking about. So having that documented outreach, if some bunch of people want to form a group that does artwork, and another one wants to do legal strategies, and another one wants to do whatever, food distribution, all legitimate shit. But we don't all gonna do it the same way. We're gonna do it in the way that moves us in our lives. But we should all be working towards the same goals. And those goals should be dictated by the experiences of the people you're talking about. And that's not just word of mouth. And it's also not just the people that come to your meetings, because the people that come to your meetings tend to already agree with you anyway. So it's also about doing street outreach into the community where people may not even know who you are, but you say, we're fighting for this. What's your experience and what do you think we should be pushing for? And really documenting that, I think, gives you a really uh, accountability that is, you're not the leader, you're just implementing what the community of people you're repping are telling you their priorities are. And I think that's a real position of strength. It's also, unfortunately, incredibly unique.
Abby, is now a good time to ask more questions?
Well, I had some specific questions here, and I can see them or I can share the screen, but that sounds like it might be more difficult to share the screen when we can't see each other. So I can just say the questions and then you can answer them, Paul, and then you can take over I'll just say the question and then you can take over with how you want to handle it, Mars.
I want to do one at a time.
Yes, of course.
Just making sure we're on the same
I'm going to
page.
do all questions at once because you talked shorter than we were expecting. So yeah, we have some time here.
Well, it said here 1 minute. I thought I went too long. Sorry.
Oh no, it's 15 minutes. I sent you a
Oh, okay.
introducing you.
That was close to 15 minutes. Come on.
Okay. So I'm just going to say one of the things you mentioned was you passed the Right to Rest Act.
No, we didn't pass it. We got it introduced. We got our asses kicked in 3 states, like 4 times in each state. We never passed it.
Wow.
I wish we had passed it.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So the ones that you have, I know you've made huge changes in San Francisco. Can you say what were some of the successes you had in San Francisco, and how did you get it to pass? Because I know you've done some critical changes in San Francisco or elsewhere, wherever.
Yeah. I mean, and honestly, I think this is where we get down into the minutia. Like Boise was a great decision, but clearly Boise didn't stop sweeps, right? So I would never put out San Francisco and whatever accomplishments we've gotten as great accomplishments. And I think that just because I was around during Hope 6 when all the public housing got destroyed and welfare reform, and the organizers would say, oh, welfare was only cut 12%, we won, right? So just to be clear, like, I think it's a big deal that San Francisco has a shelter grievance procedure. It's the only one. It's been around forever. I've always wondered why it's an anomaly and not a process that's applied everywhere. But it's simply a grievance procedure for people kicked out of shelters. The end result of it has been that the shelter staff know that you can appeal and pull them into a hearing if they treat you like shit. So it has decreased how badly people get treated. It doesn't eliminate it. But it shifted the power dynamic because people are always talking about how shitty they get treated in the shelters. And in San Francisco, at least, there's a place you can go to get a hearing. And it's funded by the city, and we use the welfare laws to justify it. If the welfare department's paying for a service, there has to be advocates for people that feel they were denied or cut off of those services. So like we just like used whatever mechanisms we could find to implement that. I would also say that the Street Sheet Project has been a major public education tool. Ours isn't a commercial endeavor, so it doesn't get hung up in that. The Homeless Coalition's never made money off of the fucking street sheet. That's not the purpose of it. It's a voice of an organizing entity. and an organizing campaign. But it's got really good artwork, and it's got really well-written pieces, and it's got some hard-hitting news, and it sells. And it's a alternative to panhandling for people that are out in the street. You know, obviously with COVID, it's not at its height right now, but for 30 years, we've been selling 30,000 papers a month, and that's 30,000 bucks going right into the pockets of poor community members. It also is a great volunteer recruitment tool because people come in, they start writing, they start engaging, and the next thing you know, they're working at the organization and they're an organizer and writing articles instead of selling the paper.
You know, we try to sell that here, and we not sell it, give it to people, these papers we picked up, I guess, from you, and or from somewhere in San Francisco, and then we try to distribute it to the houseless individuals, and no one seemed to want to sell it. We can't get it going here, but maybe we can.
But I also think it's, and I know Street Spirit and Street Sheet, and Robert would come and pick up the batches, and then we ended up shipping them down later. And the thing, and like when Street Sheet got started, like the first idea was to expand the Street Sheet in San Francisco to the East Bay. And thanks to Terry and those guys, it was like, no, let's do 2 papers instead of 1, because I think the local aspect of what's in that paper is more, it gives a lot more ownership to the local people that are distributing it, and their opportunities to, and as somebody was coming from the streets, the Tenderloin Times in San Francisco published an article I wrote. I carried that fucker around for years. Like, you know, like it just, like, to see something you wrote put out in a local paper feels good. It's a cool feeling. And you know, so I think it's more difficult to use it as an alternative to panhandling or whatever, when it's transported from one community to another. And the stuff that people write about from their own lives tend to be really local, like tend to be like what's happening in my life. And so, you know, it may be the coalition staff and myself and others would write more from a universal perspective on the issues, but 90% of what you're going to read in the Street Sheet is about what's happening in San Francisco around homelessness. So why would anybody in Santa Cruz want to pay $1 for that? You know?
Yeah. I guess it was the other paper that we were picking up, not the Street Sheets, but what was the other one called?
Well, you were doing both for a while, and then Street Spirit is the other one.
Street Spirit.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you print articles from people here in Street Spirit.
Yes, they do. Or used to, more so, I think.
Okay. Another question is, how did you begin coalition building and the creation of a mass movement, both for the reform in the shape of legal and lobbying power, and for revolution in opposition to state Band-Aid solutions where mutual aid fits in? The long question.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you when we started the San Francisco coalition, several of us had been around and seen the transformation of community groups responding to the fact that community members had nowhere to live versus the implementation of homeless programs. It didn't start with the city or the feds or any of them funding homeless programs. It started with community groups saying, what the fuck is going on here? And And then we saw the advent of government funding. And when government wants to kill a revolution, they fund it and they force everybody to get a 501c3. And now you work for them. They're funding you. So capitalism being what it is, if I'm giving you money every year, you work for me. And I'm going to hold you accountable. You're not going to hold me accountable. Homelessness is now your fucking problem, not mine. And I'm paying you to deal with it. And so we formed the coalition like specifically as with one mindset, because at that time we were coming out of these entities. We didn't see the service providers as separate, because they weren't at that point, as a shield for the service providers to be able to bring those frontline experiences to an organizing effort. And by ensuring that the Homeless Coalition never, ever has gotten it started in '87, and to this day, has never gotten a dime of government money. Like, that's just not government, we're not, no. And in fact, we don't take any money with strings attached to it. I still say we, but they don't take any money with strings attached to it. So like so the service providers, a lot of them, certainly not all of them, saw it more as a safe space for them to dabble in the waters of systemic change, as opposed to being out front on their own. Because the local governments will kill your funding if you're organizing to change the priorities of local government. Like, they will. They love it when you're an advocate on the shit they want you to advocate on. They hate it when you're an advocate telling them where they're fucking up. So like, understanding that that's not going to happen. That like, and at the same time, you know, like we call it in the without housing stuff that's on our website and shit, we call it the vicious cycle of homeless policy. It's like it just goes in a wheel, and every time these government initiated plans don't work, it just continues to reinforce the service resistant argument about why the shit's not working. Well, we keep trying. We did housing first. We did chronic homeless. We did HUD-VASH. We did a 5-year plan. We did a 10-year plan. And they're not taking it. It's not working for them. As opposed to the whole fucking thing is a joke. It's a game. Point in time head counts. They were created to bring the number of homeless people down. So as opposed to doing a gaps analysis between demand for service and ability to meet the demand, they switched it to point in time head counts, and the numbers of homeless people went way the fuck down. Like, and families and youth got fucked, royally fucked. On January 25th, there's not a lot of people sleeping out on the streets having their heads counted by these fucking trackers. So families doubled up, families couch surfing, youth couch surfing, families in SROs. They're now called poorly housed. They're no longer considered homeless. And the funding that went to serve them went to fund chronic homeless programs. And literally across California, across the country, family service shelters closed down and chronic homeless single adult programs reopened in the same facility. So like that whole system that we keep perpetuating, and then I saw in that thing blaming mayors for doing it. If the city doesn't do a point in time head count, the city doesn't get HUD money. So telling you right now, the city's gonna do point in time head counts. If the city doesn't do HMIS, the city ain't gonna get HUD money. So whether the cities think HMIS is good or bad, they're gonna fucking do it. Like the power of capitalism dictates, if you want our money, you better do what the fuck we tell you. And so like the intake processes, the coordinated care, all of this Byzantine, stupid ass, worthless ass, system driven stuff is mandated by the funding source that's coming to the city. So I think like forcing them to recognize that you understand those systems better than they do. You know how the game's being played. You know how the shit's working. It's not all that complicated a system. Can then get to, so what are you going to do to protect community members that are suffering from this oppression? Like the federal government is killing people. The federal government has created the advent of contemporary homelessness. It's clearly documented. Like the Without Housing report shows a $54 billion drop in affordable housing funding over a 3-year window. And then we started opening shelters in '83. Like there's undisputable evidence as to what created the shit we're living with. And not, okay, I can't do, it's the county's fault. It's the Fed's fault. It's the state's fault. We have to do something right away. It's 37 years down the road of this fucking game. Right away is long past gone and over. What are you going to do now in protecting the people that are suffering the consequences of these draconian policies is something the local government can do. And join forces with the organizers to change this shit is something the local government can do. Instead of fighting with us because we're trying to protect people that are suffering from draconian neoliberal economic policies.
So I have 2 more questions, and I think we can open up for questions and answers. But one of them is, we were supposed to do people, I forgot that part. Well, we can just open up to questions and answers after this, and anything that Paul has said, you can refer to it, just write it down. I think it's better anyway. So Paul, how do you suggest, when we have a very conservative city council who just wants our unhoused population to disappear, and no matter, we're fighting the money interest, the usual shit that goes in most cities, and it feels like there's nothing we can do. But I don't know if that was in San Francisco that you.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so how were you able to pass things or with them, or how did you do it? It was like a group of lobbying people or changing the people's mindset, or I would love to hear, I think a lot of us would like to hear that.
I was thinking of this when they were talking about how do we appease the assholes that stormed the Capitol the other day. Like there's just certain people you're not going to reach. And it's probably more important for the groups to stop fighting with each other than it is to convince these other assholes to join in our cause. And I think, it's an overused term, but I don't think you can sell short building your foundation, building your base, base building. But I just like, that's like up there with silo-based organizing in my mind. It's like, I'm sick of hearing that shit. But really making sure that when you say we, you being your group, there you can actually turn to the outreaches and the other community forums to show who we is, and really legitimizing the use of that term, because our joke is the last thing poor people need is another fucking leader. But it's also one of the most misused definitions of we in the world. Like you gotta be able to credibly rep the people that you're repping, more so than you need to be able to rep all the homeless people in America, because that ain't gonna happen. And so, and obviously, over 37 years, it ain't like any of, it's like people call me an expert on this shit. It's like, so I've been getting my ass kicked for 37 years. That makes me an expert only on issues of poverty and homelessness. Would that be true? Usually an expert means you're successful, you know, like I'm tenacious and I'm still here. But we need to recognize this is a long haul. We're talking about, you know, a massive wave of neoliberalism since the Reagan Revolution, but hundreds of years of colonization before that. And we're talking about housing as a human right. I mean, we used to commodify individuals in order to justify slavery. You think we're going to decommodify housing tomorrow? Like, this is a long haul campaign. And I think one of the things is to build a foundation so the next generation can get some walls up. And the generation after them might actually be able to pull off housing for all human beings. But we need to recognize our responsibilities as organizers is to lay a foundation and take the garbage out and do all that shit and not have the answers and not have all these, it shouldn't, our legitimacy shouldn't just be based on victories because we're talking about racism and classism in America. Our legitimacy should be based on our tenaciousness and our foundation building. And just trying to lay a foundation so that it's more accountable. And I think the street outreach is a really important tool in building accountability, and our forms are on the website, whatever. Everything on our website's fucking free, take it. But I think the more we focus on that, the less we fight with each other, because the only people we need to listen to are the ones that are filling out the outreach forms. They're the ones that are driving what it is we're talking about as our priorities.
So I'm just going to follow up instead of asking that other question, and then we'll do Q&A. Just to follow up on your question, did you ever, with such a right-wing or whatever conservative city council at any point in time in San Francisco, were you able to make changes?
Yeah, I was meeting with a group from Kansas City today. They would not consider Santa Cruz a right-wing city council. Anyway, right-wing city councils are a relative term in our neck of the woods.
Well, the city council that, let me just put it another way. They want our houseless community to disappear, and
yeah,
it's very difficult for them.
I hear
so,
you.
However, that
I hear
how can you pass anything with them to make changes to ordinances like this quality of life ordinance that they're going to propose pretty soon that is disgusting, that maybe someone sent that to you, I don't know.
I haven't seen that particular ordinance that you're talking about, but I'd be more than happy to take a look at it. I'm sure I've seen similar ones in the past. I mean, my 2 cents is, if it's going to be a fight, make it a fight. Like, don't back down. Like, if they're going to introduce this thing, not just threaten to kick their asses, but really organize with the goal of, then we're going to make your life miserable. I always compare it to, you know, I was in the streets as a kid, and there were times, man, I was going to lose the fucking fight. I knew I was going to lose the fight, but I was going to get one punch in anyway. And that's how I've looked at organizing as well. It's like, you know, even if you're going to kick my ass, you're going to know you were in a fight, and I'm not going to back down. And people need to feel that they're entitled to shit, whether they're getting it or not at right now. They need to embrace that feeling of, I'm a human being, man. I'm entitled to be treated with some decency and some respect. And not just as a concept, as an actual belief system. And that's a major part of the organizing. And there has to be a fearlessness attached to it. and a lack of intimidation about the systems you're up against. Like, they're kicking your ass anyway. Why would you give them any credibility and be intimidated by them? You know, they're kicking your ass. Like when we would go to Sacramento for these hearings and we would have 150, 200 people lined up to testify in support of the Right to Rest Act, they would have 8 motherfuckers lined up in opposition, and they were winning 11-4 and 11-3 at the final votes, you know? But the passion, the energy of the people that got up and spoke because it was something they believed in and something they were fighting for, carried over into the organizing. And that can be in support of the Right to Rest Act. It can be against draconian pieces of legislation like this. And creating fact sheets in which we can help with if you want. Like, really, you know us a little bit, Abby. Like, very rarely do we put out shit that's more than 1 page front and back with a piece of artwork. It's like, you got to get it short, tight, and accurate, you know, and then they can go look at the legislation and see exactly what you pulled is in there. But something that's easy digestible, that's got a piece of artwork attached to it, and that people might actually fucking read, like, is important.
Well, now it's time for Mars to take over with questions and answers and discussion.
Thanks for all of that. I've been trying to summarize a little bit in the chat so we don't lose some of the, like, these awesome nuggets of wisdom.
Oh, come on.
Well, you could, I'm not going to pretend it's not useful. But let's see. So there's someone actually asked a question in the chat. I just want to go to that and then we can open it up. Someone was asking, like, if we're lacking bargaining power right now and still in the place of kind of building that power, then do you have any thoughts on allying with tenant unions or squatting movements or things that are, like, kind of adjacent to like have to do with housing issues? But yeah, go ahead.
No, the squatting's where I cut my teeth back in the 80s. Like, squatting's the shit, man. Squatting's just like, it's gonna sit there empty. Fuck you, I'm taking it. Like, I think squatting is one of the most empowering aspects of organizing around issues of homelessness. And figuring out a way to squat ghost homes would be even better, but that's probably a bit dicier. But there's a lot of squatting starting up again, which feels really good. And a lot of it is public. You'd be surprised. Caltrans and HUD own shitloads of empty buildings. And so in Philly, they've been doing a lot of HUD stuff. In LA, they've been doing Caltrans properties, LA and one other place. But it's really cool to me, and it's so egregious how many empty units there are and how many people there are in the street and the disparity. And it makes a great poster, but it actually makes an even better statement to be rectifying that problem. So, and also we work a lot with Right to the City and other tenant rights groups, and using eviction, like framing it in the context of getting tenant rights organizers. They all know what a fucking eviction is. They may not have it down right away what a sweep means, because sweep is such an amorphous thing. But we were talking with these guys in Kansas City today, because the city's like, well, we're not sweeping. It's really nicely done, meaning cops and a social worker. But it's like, if a landlord helps you move, or if a landlord throws your shit in the street, either way, the landlord evicted you. Like you're still evicted. And that's like just a way of framing with the tenant rights community, how closely connected the implementation of these oppressive systems are.
Got it. Thanks.
And, you know, with Hope 6, man, if people were organizing around Hope 6, like it got so close to the public housing resident groups and the homeless groups really coalescing. And in certain cities, we had more success than in others. But But like in LA and here, luckily, and a couple of places, like those relationships have sustained themselves in terms of those groups working a little bit more together.
Mm-hmm. I see another question in the chat. Before I go to that one, I'm curious if there's anyone not in the chat that has a question. All right, we're going to go to the chat questions. Just want to make space for people who are on devices that might not see the chat as easily. Okay, let's see. There's questions in the chat that are about like trash. And so one of the things of like at camps that, you know, people clean up a camp, the press comes in and takes a picture of the garbage. Then the city manager goes on and says health and safety is the reason we have to sweep or something like that. So are there thoughts about how to combat that type of narrative and in our work?
I mean, I would say that that's one of the more difficult long-term systemic things, that in bathrooms. Like they use it, they want the trash and the feces and stuff to be there. They need it to be there in order to justify their actions. And yet they're the ones that could really control whether or not it's there or not. So like, I don't know how many hefty trash bags we can buy for our community over the long haul and then figure out where to take all that stuff. You know, in Berkeley, at Where Do We Go Berkeley, they were actually somewhat successful because they were on Caltrans property and there was the city and they'd had an amazing organizer that was able to negotiate getting dumpsters, and the dumpsters were overflowing because nobody was picking them the fuck up. So they went and rented their own dumpsters. Like that's just not always sustainable, and it's hard to do on a citywide or a county-wide basis. It worked at Where Do We Go Berkeley, but I don't know how sustainable an approach that is. I do know that, you know, trash cleanup is like, it was ironic to me when last year when the federal budget froze, and then all of a sudden they were talking about in all the federal parks, there was garbage and feces everywhere from the people that went to the park and it was closed and they dumped their garbage and they took a shit, but the bathrooms were closed. And it's like, so here it's like, well, this is just something we have to clean up. Whereas in our life, it's something we have to be arrested for. Like it was kind of ironic. But it is what's going to happen. And, you know, there are camps that clean up and still get fucking swept. Like they find some other reason to do it.
Yep.
So I think it's just trash bags come in really fucking handy at homeless encampments. You'll never have somebody tell you, we don't need that shit. You bring trash bags to a homeless encampment.
And do you have thoughts about, this is another question from the chat, also about trash, about working with like public sanitation departments and things like that, like, or experience with how that has gone?
I mean, to be honest, it was something I thought, now why the fuck would anyone do that? And in the instances where everybody on both sides agrees this is a trash cleanup, the people living there participate in it as much as the people that the city has sent out or the state has sent out to clean it, so long as it's a legitimate cleanup. And that's where the vigilance comes in. Like that's where the monitoring or the videotaping these guys or whatever, where it can get really dicey if there's an altercation or something, you know. You're running a risk just having those entities interact with each other that are normally hostile. But in the cases where, no, this is a cleanup, man. we're cleaning up. Just common sense, it works really well.
Are there anyone who wants to say their question out loud instead of in the chat that is here?
Yeah, just unmute yourself if you want to talk.
Or I could put Motown back on.
I'll just say that, and I think Cassius has a question in the chat, Mars.
Yeah, I see that.
Okay.
I also know that there's one of my mentors often talks about how on average teachers in the US wait about 3 seconds before giving an answer when no one responds. And so sometimes I try to wait longer to see if anyone's got something in there, but it's like percolating. So I'm happy with waiting a little bit, and also we can go to the question in the chat after.
Hey,
maybe
Mars,
Yes?
I have something. It's not exactly a question, but I guess it should be a question. We know that during the last, there have been two things going on in Santa Cruz, Paul. One is the large encampment at San Lorenzo Park. There's also a lot of people who have been camping along Highway 1, and in both cases, there was a lot of garbage building up. And what we have learned in both cases is that the city had turned garbage collection over to a contractor who stopped collecting. And I don't know, it looks to me, because I don't go to San Lorenzo Park a lot, but I drive along Highway 1 sometimes, and it looks now like the garbage along that encampment, they're doing better. And so what I'm thinking, I don't quite know how to put it as a question, but when the city has given over or washed their hands essentially of their responsibility, if somebody, you know, I've seen this happen in communities where garbage collection was given over to a private company. And when it didn't work, people got up in arms and said, wait a minute, we're paying taxes, we're paying utility bills, whatever. Have you dealt with any of these things where it becomes, it goes into the hands of someone who'll be making a profit, and then they are or are not doing the work? I'm not quite sure how to word it, but.
No, but I mean, there's like the city of Portland now contracts with a private corporation to conduct their sweeps, you know, and they call it cleanups. I mean, we live in a neoliberal system. So
Right.
Of course, government is contracting out what was usually their responsibilities. That's neoliberalism. So like they also, if they're contracting it out, it means the contract is accessible to public records requests. And if the company's not held accountable to humanely clean these encampments, then it does give you a foot in the door in terms of accountability for federal or for tax dollars, to say, you know, this needs to be tightened up so they can be held accountable. But I mean, the reality is I've not seen government contract out to treat people humanely in the course of addressing the issue of homelessness, to be honest with you.
Can I interject on that topic, Mars?
Yeah, Abby, you wanted to, and also Joy wants to speak to that same thing.
Joy, I know. Joy knows very dearly what's going on here, so I hope she talks. But the city is claiming just so you know, the city claims the contractor stopped picking up the trash. But what we found out is that the city actually asked the contractor to stop. So that's one thing. And there's a lot of tricks that the city does. And I'll just give you one little thing. At San Lorenzo Park, they stopped picking up the trash, and the contractor stopped. He's now picking it up voluntarily a lot, and he has spent $13,000 on it out of his own pocket. So anyway, so with the houseless people, we gave a lot of the hefty trash bags to the people there. And what they did is they bagged up all their stuff and they piled it up. I told the city council they've got to pick it up. And I also CC'd the media. It got them to the front page. And then all of a sudden a dumpster appeared the next day. So, there's tricks, but anyway, that was one fucking little success that I could think of this, but I would love to hear what Joy has to say because she's working on the whole trash thing in the city.
I can't say that I can speak to like all of the issues, and it is confusing, and you get conflicting information. Also, things are so different from one site to another. So, San Lorenzo Park, it's the same independent hauler who's been working sort of part paid, part volunteer. But it's just so different because by Highway 109, there's Caltrans property. And there's also a railroad that goes through there. So the independent contractor is paid to pick up from the railroad, but then he also picks up from, the garbage sort of is expansive. So he ends up picking up more than what he's paid for. Then to complicate matters, the city manager's office approved finally, maybe a month ago, a weekly pickup of wheelie bins. So this is a really positive thing that's come from the city manager's office at the same time something really bad is happening somewhere else. So they found some money, and there's someone at Public Works who's really, kind of like personally invested in getting the garbage picked up regularly. So that's a positive thing, but then it also creates confusion with these two different wheelie bins that get moved around. And another thing that happened positively that Jane, would have seen an improvement in the garbage scene is the same city worker, Lupe Sanchez in Public Works, and other people that we would often feel very at odds with, worked for, like 6 weeks to get a Caltrans dumpster at the site, but they had no labor. So I got some volunteers together, like just put the word out, and 7 of us picked up, I just found out it was like a ton and a half of garbage, maybe close at more than 20 yards of garbage. So, it's a huge improvement. People need, like, the garbage needs to be a sort of supportive community-based program with, people inside and outside helping. And, it seems like a very relational practice. But I think it's also a unique thing. Like at one site, you'll have this very antagonistic and confusing situation where garbage seems to be employed as it's like weaponized. And then you'll have another site where there's cooperation, for whatever reason. So that's my little bit.
Thanks. I also saw in the chat a question, which I know you spoke to a little bit earlier, Paul, but it's a question about, like, let me see if I can find it. Just like any thoughts you have on working with cities and counties in general? I know you expressed some concerns about like what happens when there's money from the city involved earlier. So can you expand a little bit on like any thoughts you have about in what ways it might be appropriate or sketchy or dangerous or whatever to work with government entities?
I mean, I think, and to Joy's comment earlier, it's like, well, it feels a little weird to be working with these people on this since we're fighting with them on other stuff. Fine, so be it. It's about what is it we're doing and not who we're doing it with, because people are going to come and go. It's the systems that are oppressive. People just bounce in and out. Mayors come and go. Like that shit happens. But if if the work that we're doing together is work that is wanted and inclusive of the people we're working for, then we just do it. You know, I don't see and I have, to be very honest, I've caught shit from other groups, and you know, because when I was at the Homeless Coalition, I was suing Frank Jordan, who was mayor, over Matrix, and working with the Jordan administration to open the Homeless Death Prevention Center. To me, I didn't see any conflict whatsoever. You know, like, it is what it is. And the homeless people wanted the Homeless Death Prevention Center, and so they wanted us to stop Matrix. So I was doing both. And I think that's a really, you know, powerful thing about it, building in accountability to your structure as to why you're doing it. And to the extent that we're able to pull it off, is if there's any hesitancy, and this is also true with some of the national and statewide homeless groups. Like, honestly, I wouldn't work with Housing California unless I had a written MOU about decision making. And then once we both agreed to this is the process by which decisions will be made on behalf of the group, then we can work together. And I try to do that with any government entities I'm working on a project with as well. You know, if you won't put it in writing how we're going to make final decisions working together on this project, then maybe I really don't want to work on this project with you.
Okay. Abby, I want to check in with you just before I take other questions. I'm wondering if we have about 10 minutes left. I'm wondering if there was anything you wanted to bring up specifically with people that are here now about next steps, or whether that be just planning a next meeting or something just before our last 10 minutes are up, or if you'd rather just spend the time while Paul's here just doing questions and follow up some other way.
Yeah, I think it would be better to spend time with Paul, and then I guess we'll just have to come up with a meeting. It's almost impossible to get something where
I can jump off like when you guys are done with my ass and let you go about your business.
No, I think we're gonna end at 6, and I think we want to continue to take questions from people, to use that time with you right now, and then we can plan another meeting in the future.
Okay.
Yeah, I have, Mars, I've got another question, but I'm not reading chat, so I don't know if there are questions there.
I'm sorry, I totally missed that question. Can you repeat that?
No, all I'm saying is I have a question, but I'm not reading chat, so there may be people ahead of me.
I'm sorry that I couldn't hear that bit. So, okay. Yes, there's not a current question in the chat, so why don't you go ahead?
Okay, Paul, early on, you said two kind of different things that really stayed with me. I think because I'm not in the city government, I work with other groups, and when the issue of coming up with groups disagreeing, you said, we have a way to do it, to make it work. So I'm interested in that, if that's something that's explainable. But in general, how, sort of what have you done to bring in organizations? Just talk some about that process and what has worked well and what maybe were problems.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was a solution to the problem or not, but it certainly gave some clarity for us, which is we documented our street outreach and said that our priorities were coming from the responses we got from people that were living outdoors in our community. And any group that wanted to work with us in responding to those responses have at it. Let's work together. And any group that wanted to tell us you don't know what you're talking about, well, then you can do your shit. I found that it really, like at one point, several organizations, we were having all these meetings and shit about how are we going to work together? We need to build a unite. But people started getting really hung up. Like, I will never be able to sit through a consensus-driven decision-making process. It doesn't make me bad or evil or I'm an ass. It's just I can't do it. And so if I had to do that in order to work with this other group, well, shit, we just weren't going to work together. Like that's all there was to it. So it was, I use that as an example. It was the same the other way around. Like people just had their own shit. And so at the Homeless Coalition, we were like, look, we're in the shelters 3 nights a week at different shelters, talking to people about how they're being treated. We're in the streets every day, documenting what people are telling us they want us to do. Like, that's who we're accountable to. And that drives the decisions that we make as an entity in terms of what those of us that have or have not or never will be or might one day be homeless ourselves, like this is where we get our marching orders from. And it just cuts through. Then the difference is you can embrace them and be like, thank God we're all different, because some people really believe strongly in consensus decision making, and others are, I'm 75%. Like, that's my opinion. That's how I move through the world. That's how rap is structured. But 90% of the time we get 95, we are consensus. So we get hung up on shit that we don't need to be hung up on if we just get our direction from the same place.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense to me theoretically.
Let them finish.
Yes. Is there anyone? I think Brian. Is that you? Do you have your hand up?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Unmute, Brian. Unmute.
I'm on.
No, he's
You're
unmuted.
unmuted.
Can you hear
We
me?
got you. We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can. Great. This is fascinating and very interesting. He's done a great job. I wondered, do you know Brent Adams? Have you dealt with him at all in Santa Cruz?
Was he the former mayor that came up here by saying
No.
he was a socialist and trying to criminalize everybody?
That's
No.
That's Justin Cummings.
Oh, okay. Same shit. White guy. I don't know.
No. Then you're talking about a different person. He's a black guy.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So you haven't met with him?
No, I have not.
Oh,
And
he's incredible. He's been handling it personally. Now we've got donations from people in the area. We donate for him and help him financially.
but what does he do?
But he's been all over the place, searching the best way to do this thing. But he's been basically ignored by the city.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been talking about this thing for years.
Yeah.
Brian
That's
Adams.
the problem.
Brent.
Brent Adams.
Yes.
Yeah.
Abby.
I'm going to be blunt with everyone in this group. Sorry to interrupt, but he's one of the people that, unfortunately, he does awesome work, Brian. He does awesome work, and a lot of us love his work, but he won't be a team player with other groups, unfortunately. But it's okay. That's okay. Just like Paul was saying, they do their own thing, and he does great stuff, and I appreciate him for what he does. But anyway, I think everyone here knows who Brent is, and the city has concerns about working with him. And I can talk offline with you. But
Yeah.
I think there's a question in here, Mars, from Garrett.
Forgot I was muted. I see that question. We do have 2 minutes. So I wonder, maybe Paul, you can kind of like answer that question and then wrap it up in some way, whatever you want to leave us with. and the question, I think you addressed it earlier in the meeting to some extent, but like, the question is about, do you see efforts when people start going after grants and government funds? Is that signs that an organization's starting to go the wrong way? And like, what concerns do you have about that? I know you talked about some of this earlier, so if you could summarize it, kind of encapsulate it for us.
In 1 minute.
I mean, money's all made in the same place. It's what kind of credence you give it and how much power you give it and how far down the road you're willing to sell your ass to get it. It's not the act of asking for donations that makes you corrupt. It's letting the money drive your agenda and dictate what you're doing and who you work for. And if you're true to yourself and who you are, whether you're Brent Adams or whether you're Paul Boden or whether you're whatever, Willie Baptist, you don't let the money dictate what you're doing and what your priorities are. You use the money to obtain your goals. And then to me, it's all the same. I wouldn't touch government money for all the money in the world because that never comes with no strings attached. The $20 checks we get from 500 individual donors, they never have strings attached to that shit. $100, $150, they never attach strings. They support what you do and they give you the resources to do it. The shit with strings attached is what kills you.
Thanks. Okay.
Thank you all.
Thanks so much for coming. And
I did want to close with everything on our website is free to download and take and use and hopefully learn from, or at least have fun with the posters and shit.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me, Abby.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mars.
If you need any more support.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abby, for host for getting this together, and thank you, Paul.
Yay.
Can we talk a little bit about what those of you who pulled this together originally, what your thoughts have been about next steps?
I have to go because I'm
Yeah, go ahead. I can talk about it.
good with, are you good with saving the chat?
Yeah, I just saved it.
Great, just checking. Okay, bye, thanks everybody.
Bye,
Thank
Mars.
you for hosting or for
Thank
facilitating.
you. So there's several of us on here who actually that can answer that question. Actually, just about all of us. I think all of us. So
I don't know where I am right now.
you don't know where you are.
Don't ask me.
So, but to answer your question, oh wait, actually I forgot your question. It was about how it got started.
Yeah, well, no, what my question is, as you were putting this together, you probably had some thoughts about more than just today. And I'm curious what you've been thinking, sort of fantasies, a variety of ideas, whatever.
You know, Jane, thanks for bringing that up because that would have been a good ending. But we said it in our little, Santa Cruz intro. Oh, you know what? I think I'll stop recording now because it's going to get too long.